Last year we talked about the one and only killer puppet turkey movie, Thanksgiving. Now they haven't made another Thanksgiving movie yet, so I had to find some other stuff. So I was scouring the internet looking for indie horror movies, and around Thanksgiving time it's slim pickings. Now Christmas has a lot more options, but Thanksgiving, a lot of the ones I found were just kind of like movies that took place on Thanksgiving. Blood Rage, Christie, what are some of the other ones? Seance, Boogeyman, Alien Abduction, Incident in Lake County. But these were all just kind of like regular horror movies that took place on Thanksgiving, but they didn't have what I was looking for. Is I got so much amusement out of that puppet killer turkey in Thanksgiving that I wanted to see another puppet, like if possible, a human turkey puppet hybrid. Closest I got to that was, of course, Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead. And there's a Native American theme that ties into Thanksgiving because it takes place at a restaurant built on an Indian burial ground. And that never turns out well. Look at what happened in Pet Sematary. Look what happened in The Shining. All that stuff built on Indian burial grounds. It never goes well for who's staying there after that. And then I found this one called Blood Freak, made in 1972 on a budget of $25,000, directed by Brad Grinter and Stephen Hawks. A biker gets a job at a turkey farm and agrees to act as a guinea pig for some chemicals that need tested, failing to anticipate the murderous side effects. Blood Freak, I'd never heard of this movie before. And it's known for being notoriously bad, well, for a number of different ways. The most obvious one is that there's a guy that runs around as like a half human, half turkey, but like they just have a big paper mache turkey head. So super low budget. So this movie is, yes, difficult to get through because it has all the trademarks. Bad monotone acting, lots of scenes, with walking before it takes a while for anything to happen. Not exactly the kind of movie where scenes just flow next to each other. This is the bizarre thing because the whole point of this movie was like an anti-drug, sort of like Christian-themed movie. But the way they went about it was so strange. In Blood Freak, Stephen Hawks is the main actor. Brad Grinter is this guy who's got sort of like this Polly Walnuts from The Sopranos or Eddie Munster kind of hair, where he's got this sort of like wavy and grayish, and then it's pretty greased back. And he's chain smoking through the whole thing. And he does all these sort of Rod Sterling type of, it's just like cut to him randomly in the movie. And it'll be like, isn't it interesting what's happening here? And he'll give sort of like a public service announcement, about like temptation or any of the other kind of like things that are happening on in the movie. And he'll just sort of drone on for a while. I mean, it's pretty humorous. I mean, he's chain smoking while he's doing this the entire way. And then at the end of the movie, he makes his last statement and he's just like hacking up a lung. So at another statement that I'm trying to make, or he'll say like, and then another thing when he goes into his last point, he's like, and he just starts hacking up, and he can't stop hacking up. And they must have not had enough budget for another take. Back in those days, they shot everything on film, so they couldn't afford to waste any film. So I guess he decided that him hacking up a lung on camera, let's just go with that. It was good enough. Let's move on. Let's just go with that. Yeah, but this movie is, I would say this movie is recommended viewing just for the fact that like in the 70s, somebody made a movie about like a half man, half turkey, and only had the budget to put like a paper mache head on. Aside from that, like some of the scenes are pretty comical because the guy at the beginning, so the biker at the beginning, he gets out of the main character. His name's Herschel. He gets out of Vietnam, and this girl, he helps her out. She's having car trouble. He helps her out. So he takes her back to her place, and there's all these people hanging out there. It almost sounds like a commune kind of feel to it. And she's much more kind of like a girl that will do the right thing. And then her sister is really just laying the grease on Herschel on the main character. She wants him bad, so she gives him drugs. And then he gets hooked on these drugs, and he's looking for a job, so he goes to work at this turkey farm. And there's these guys that are at this turkey farm that are doing experiments. So he basically like eats this tainted turkey meat, and then he becomes like a half human, half turkey, and runs around attacking drug dealers and everything. So they're doing this like public service announcement basically as a movie against drug use and temptation and everything. And the way that they go about it, this is what makes it so just bizarre. The way they go about it is they do it in grindhouse style. So it looks like a 70s grindhouse movie. It was made in the 70s. It looks just like anything that you would see at like a grindhouse theater during then. And they also do like they show gore and everything else just like regular grindhouse movies does, but it's preaching against it. It's just a very bizarre contradiction. And then the intercutting of Brad Grinter making all these statements about morality in this movie, and then going back to all these sort of like graphic drive-in scenes, but a lot of it is just like boring stuff in between. But you know, like if somebody gets like a limb hacked off or something, they're screaming and the camera stays on it as blood is squirting all over and throats are getting slit, violence is happening, and then they'll cut back to the guy and be like, now what can we learn from this? So it's just a bizarre experiment of a movie to look back on and be like, I can't believe that this got made. This is bizarre. But, of course, check this one out as in a time capsule. Now, this one, I mean, you can get some entertainment out of a couple of the bad lines in there and the monotone delivery. And just the whole way, just the whole bizarre, ironic way that everything is set up in this movie. The movie as a whole is, it's rough to get through. But that being said, it's worth checking out just for the bizarreness of it. And it will make for good party conversation. You bring this movie up, people will be like, where the hell did you hear about this thing? And you tell them Dead Harvey sent you. Okay, now to me, the quintessential Thanksgiving horror movie, next to Thanksgiving, of course, is Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead. Zombified chickens attempt to kill the fast food workers that cook them in a restaurant built on an ancient burial ground. Directed by indie horror legend Lloyd Kaufman, who gave us The Toxic Avenger way back in the 80s. Troma Studios, of course, is the longest-running independent film studio. What's great to see in Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead, is that Lloyd, like his movies, it has all the Troma staples. Bodily fluids spraying everywhere. That green bromide seltzer stuff they use is bubbling out of people's mouths. Cartoon sound effects like Troma always uses. Over-the-top gore, over-the-top sexuality. Very un-PC. It's got a lot of elements of satire in it. It makes fun of wokeness and multiple races and religions, and while doing this, it somehow feels like it's progressive at the same time, which is that's got to be a tough thing to pull off. It also, of course, has crotch monsters. I think those are first introduced in Class of Nukem High, but I could be wrong. And of course, they do have that scene, if you've seen like in The Toxic Avenger and a lot of other Lloyd Kaufman's movies, where they just recycle that same footage of the car that flips and then is like flipping in slow motion, and then it lands and explodes. They reuse that again, too. And the movie, of course, starts out with an explosion. Everything in the movie is completely over the top. Yeah, this movie could have a completely different effect if it had a different tone. If you're not easily offended, and to watch this movie, it definitely helps to not be easily offended, because there's so many un-PC things in this movie that probably are not going to age well, especially now. But that also makes it stand out from so many other movies now, because Hollywood just does not have the balls to... Well, they wouldn't have greenlit this movie in the first place. That's why it's an indie movie. But the comic, the comic timing from a lot of the actors in this movie are great. A lot of the main characters in this are based off of, their names are based off of fast food restaurants. Jason Yakinen, his character is Arby. Kate Graham, her character is Wendy. Caleb Emerson, his character is Carl Jr. Joshua Olatunde, his character is Denny. Khaled Rivera, Jose Paco Bell. So there's all these references, pop culture references, fast food references. And then they have a guy, of course, that looks like Colonel Sanders. Basically like the CEO of all these chicken restaurants. Everybody's great in this movie. I mean, sure, it's like a gross out movie and it's made in bad taste and everything. And it's completely over the top. But they get it. Like the main actors in this movie, they get it. They know what they're going for. And they do it really well. They're completely committed to it. This movie is really I think Lloyd's, to this date, his magnum opus, because it has just sort of wall-to-wall craziness. I think that the most beneficial thing about watching both this movie and Blood Freak are that it will not make you hungry. So if you've eaten too much on Thanksgiving, or if you're gonna stuff yourself like I do, always eat too much, then always feel terrible afterwards, watch this, but watch one or two of these movies beforehand. Well, especially Poultrygeist. You'll just feel disgusted. Because they make food. Troma always does this in their movies, too. They always make food look disgusting. Whenever they put food together in the movie, whenever the fast food workers are assembling food, they're spraying all this. It's always slop. Just buckets of slop and things dumped on the food, and never the complete opposite of what you would see at a poster when you're enticed to go eat fast food, or a commercial when you're enticed to go eat there. So if you've never seen a Troma movie before and you're looking for something completely weird and insane for Thanksgiving, Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead is the perfect movie for that. But just be aware that you will lose your appetite. And I think it was great that they made it a musical too, because it helps to offset the craziness of it. Okay, let's go into some trivia on this movie. I do have some trivia here that I thought was amusing. Caleb Emerson directed a movie called Die You Zombie Bastards. And when Lloyd Kaufman in the movie shoots the chicken zombies, he says, Die You Zombie Bastards. The American chicken bunker scenes were filmed in and around an empty McDonald's. The original doors, registers, grills, and fryers can all be seen in use. Other scenes, including a sex scene that takes place in a restaurant, were filmed in a church that also served as a home for the cast and crew. And John Carius, who I interviewed a couple episodes ago, he is the guy that plays the peeper at the beginning of the movie. Great character actor, just awesome. And he actually went into a lot of stories about the filming of Poultrygeist and how careful they had to be when they were filming in that church, and how they had to do like the crazy scenes outside of it. The film made national headlines in 2011 when a man named Sidney Clawwitter purchased what he thought was a DVD cleaner, but turned out to be a copy of the movie. Clawwitter called the film horrifying and a XXX film. The store owner stated that the device was prepackaged and purchased from a company based in Oakland, California. No charges are ever filed in the case. Trey Parker and Matt Stone were set to have a cameo as Arby's parents, but the scene was scrapped during shooting, so the audience never really sees the parents. While the movie was still in production, Parker and Stone were often credited for being in the film. The title was originally Good Night and Good Cluck, but Lloyd Kaufman changed the title to avoid confusion with George Clooney's Good Night and Good Luck, which were released first. While mixing the sound in post, Gabe Friedman recalled how sophomoric that the sound effects were, and he felt he was being insulted. The most egregious thing that had happened was every time a girl took their shirt off, a horrible cowbell noise was accompanied by random cartoon whistles. He remarked, they took the whole Flintstones library and threw it into our movie. And, with the lack of respect from these sound designers, from the sound effects and everything, it's obvious that we are in shock and nobody likes us. That's good. The character of Arby can be seen wearing a yellow t-shirt with Troma's iconic mascot, the Toxic Avenger, on it that says, I heart the monster hero. And then Denny's Chicken Speech is a parody of Quint's Indianapolis speech in Jaws. Yeah, there's this... The whole actually kind of... The setup of this movie reminds me of Jaws, because there's a gruesome death in the movie, and the Colonel comes in to check out the place, because it's kind of the grand opening for the place. And he wants to keep it quiet, because they want to make money and bring in all the customers. So that totally reminded me of Jaws as like a setup there. Body count 182 to 565, including a mutant chicken. So this movie is kind of like an indictment on the fast food industry. It's kind of like what they're going for. But I think it has much more effect than a movie like Super Size Me. Because you watch a movie like Super Size Me, and the guy's like, well, I'm going to eat at McDonald's every day for 30 days or whatnot. Yeah. He goes to his doctor, and the doctor's telling him, this is bad. You should stop doing this. Making this movie is dangerous to your health and all that. But, watching that, I'm not as discouraged from eating fast food, because I'm like, well, it's going to take a while for that to happen. I don't go to fast food restaurant every day like this guy is doing. Sort of like a slow burn where the effects take place. Whereas in this movie, as somebody eats some contaminated, disgusting food, they're shitting out chicken eggs, turning into chicken zombies. Chicken puppets come out of their chest. The chickens are attacking people, and they're cutting them up just like people cut up animals and serving them on the grill and stuff. I'm like, I think this has much more of an effect than that Morgan Spurlock movie did. But what the great thing about this movie is that it has that effect, but it doesn't feel like it's preachy at all, because it's a straight up like drive-in exploitation movie. Instead of like in a movie like Blood Freak, where they're right up lecturing and preaching to you, this movie just makes you feel, just because they make the food look so disgusting and everything. There's so much of a gross out factor in this when you're watching it. Then it just sort of turns you off from eating fast food, which I think was their intent. But it's much more effective in this, because you can't eat when you're watching this movie. You're going to feel like you're going to hurl. And speaking of hurl, there's just constantly people hurling in this movie, hurling up all this green stuff, which is better than if it's realistic looking hurl. But still, yeah, it's going to be tough to eat while watching this. My recommend is if you get hungry, just watch this and you'll lose your appetite. Or you'll feel less shitty on Thanksgiving if you decide to watch this before you stuff yourself. And then you may feel like, I don't really feel like eating at all today. Yeah, there's crazy shit. Lots of deaths in this movie. Lots of puppets. Chicken human puppets. Singing chicken puppets in moments. Just all kinds of if you're in for something crazy, this movie definitely delivers. It's in very bad taste, but it delivers. But it's also super entertaining if you're not easily offended. And this is the kind of stuff that it's going to take Hollywood a long time before they could ever compete with it, because Hollywood would just never do a movie on a scale this crazy. I mean, there's things happening to orifices in this movie. Crotch violence, things going through parts of the body, coming out other parts of the body, bodily fluids, just wall to wall craziness. And definitely, like, from the very first scene, unrated. There's no way this movie could ever have any kind of a rating, but Troma is completely unique in what they do. The great thing about this movie is that you can tell, like, Lloyd has not lost his touch over the years. He's not only keeping up with the same craziness that he's had in all the Troma movies before, and I think, like, for Troma stuff, you're either going to get a kick out of them and love them, or hate them and not understand them. I don't really see a lot in the middle when people have reactions to Troma movies. I dig the Troma movies a lot. Sometimes I have to be in the right mood to watch them, but I have a lot of fondness for Troma as an independent studio, especially nowadays, doing all the shit that Hollywood would never do, would never greenlight, would never clear, and giving people an alternative. So it's great that, like, Lloyd just keeps sort of doubling down. He's like, we've got to make this one even more crazy than before. We did this craziness, we got to step it up. That's sort of like how it feels like his mind is working. Like, more craziness, more insanity. Let's give people what they haven't seen before. A lot of this lunacy, though, is incorporated with gross out moments. By gross out moments, here's just a few of them. And I actually was starting to tally these up, and I lost count after a while because there are so damn many of them. But I'll just give you a few examples here. There's a zombie finger that's broken off in a cornhole. Then that broken finger is sniffed and then kept as a souvenir. There's vomiting. There is the worst defouling of a bathroom I've ever seen in a movie before. There's a man that makes out with a raw chicken, and then he also falls in love with this raw chicken, and then what you think is going to happen with this raw chicken happens. There's severed falling tongues, broken fingernails, chicken zombies hacking up humans, faces being ripped off, zombie chickens eating human skin, predator head rip off with the spine attached, brains dumped from the skull and onto the grill, like brains and eggs, balls served up in the fryer like human balls, eyes ripped out, faces taken to the meat slicer, faces taken to the fryer, eggs for breasts, and chicken puppets popping out of those eggs. I mean, there's many, like, weird things that you could imagine that happens in this movie. Let's say, like, you're having the Thanksgiving occasion and somebody's over there and there's, like, some kind of tension that's escalating, as often happens on family occasions. If you can get away with it, maybe do a screening of this, and then so many people will get disgusted and leave, that will solve the problem in and of itself. Better than winning any argument could do. Okay, so, new thing I'd like to add to our podcast here is, what kind of lessons can we take from these movies? What kind of life hacks could we learn from these? So, Dead Harvey Classroom time. What kind of life hacks or indie film lessons can we learn from these two movies? Well, in Blood Feast, if you're going to do a Rod Serling Twilight Zone type intro, probably just better to keep it as the intro and not just interrupt the movie throughout, unless you're going to be super entertaining like Joe Bob Briggs. And then the preachiness as well too. Try not to preach if you're also making a grindhouse movie. Poultrygeist just kind of speaks for itself. They don't need to preach into anybody. They just make fast food look disgusting, which is far more effective than anything in Blood Feast was. If your main special effect is going to be a turkey head, probably best to spend more budget than what you would spend on paper mache to make that costume, to sell that effect. When you go to, sort of like that movie Knock Knock that Eli Roth did, when you go to help anybody on the side of the highway, being a good Samaritan never pays off in horror movies. And if you get into a situation, like you go to a party and, like the main character Herschel is in this, beautiful women are throwing themselves at you, it's probably too good to be true. So those are the lessons that we can learn from Blood Freak. Let's move on to Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead. You can get away with a lot of un-PC stuff if you're really good at satire. And if it's over the top, cheesy, and comedic. Broken fingers inserted into the cornhole from zombies are not good luck charms. Never build anything on an ancient Indian burial ground. Stop having sex on cursed ancient Indian burial grounds. Advances towards raw chickens can lead to crotch monster wang mutilations. And last but not least, working in fast food can not only be soul crushing, but it can also be dangerous to your health as well as your cornhole.